Welcome to the Elevator Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Madden. I've had an amazing 35 years in the elevator industry, and now I'm ready to pay my knowledge forward. Let's dive right in. Welcome to the Elevator Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm very excited to be here with Lisa Diaz, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her story, her professional career, and then how she got in the elevator industry. Lisa, without further ado, give us a little background on yourself.
Well, I have to say, I didn't come from the elevator industry. My family are all lawyers, and I'm kind of a bit of a, what's the word? A bit of an odd duck. And here's how I came to the elevator industry. So I bought my first stock when I was 14, and I always learned how to make your money work for you. And I spent 35 years on Wall Street where we really tried to figure out return on invested capital, how do you build a great business, how do you invest in a big business, and how do you handle capital management. And I was kind of thinking about, so the way Wall Street works, when you get to be in your early 50s, it's time to, they do the culling of the herds. And I was in that kind of mindset. My mother's 90, she works. My grandmother worked till she was over 100. So I don't know what else to do with myself besides work. So I said, what am I going to do for the next 30 years of my life? And my aha moment happened in Grand Central Station. And Sean, you've probably been to Grand Central Station, but for me, it was always a happy place. There are people taking pictures, they're doing film studios, people are getting married. Yeah. And I missed my train one day and I went on this tour of Grand Central. And when you're from New York, you don't do tourist stuff. Like that's a tourist thing. Well, in this tourist event, I find out that Jackie Onassis has saved Grand Central from being torn down. I was like, you go, girl. This is amazing. And then the second thing happened is in the main vista, there's a black spot, which is a reference to a construction worker who came up with the idea, or there's a group of them, how to clean the ceilings to make it the beautiful place that you and I see today. And I sat on my train and I was like, what do I want to do for the next chapter of my life? I wanted to help improve the state of U.S. infrastructure. So I used to travel all the time at my job. I was a managing director at Goldman Sachs, which doesn't mean anything in the elevator industry, but in finance, it kind of means something. And I would see this amazing infrastructure. And the sort of challenge I started with is it's going to cost $2.6 trillion to get U.S. infrastructure into state of reasonable repair, according to the American Society of Engineers.
$1 trillion.
$1 trillion.
Wow.
We have an infrastructure passage, which is the biggest one since Eisenhower. So that's 70 years ago, which is for 1.2 trillion. So by my math, we're short 1.4 trillion.
Wow.
So I tried to solve, how could you extend the life cycle of U.S. assets? How could you make elevator assets, HVAC assets, buildings, airports last longer? Because we don't have the capital to rebuild like we did before. Mm-hmm. So I became a professor of smart infrastructure at Cornell Tech, and I embarked on this whole journey of how technology and innovation can improve more traditional businesses. And my aha moment with the elevator industry really came from a mentor at Gilbane. He said to me, look, we're working, it was on the Buffalo Bills Stadium. It was a $1.8 billion project. I was trying to sell my suite of technology. And he's like, Lisa, we're going to spend more money on pizza and coffee than on your technology on this project. And I'm like, got hit in the gut. He said, why don't you focus on MEP? So mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And I was like, So I put my Wall Street hat on and I said, what are good businesses that have barriers to entry, that have good growth prospects, where I could make an impact? And someone showed me an elevator company and I was like, wow, $23 billion business, very high margins, consolidated, very cool people. And I always remembered when I was a kid, one of my favorite things to do, there were these elevators at the World Trade Center that would go to windows on the world. And there was like the cyclone, a ride, boom, we went up really fast. And I'm like, I'm going to focus on vertical transportation. So that's how I came in. with an idea like two driving forces. How do you extend the life cycle? How do you make these valuable assets last longer and be more effective? And how do we improve the state of US infrastructure? So that's how we came into elevators.
That's
Different.
a pretty interesting story. Side note, some of the elevator entrepreneurs might not like that idea because they're losing modernization. But but no, it's a good piece of the puzzle because back in the day it was built like tanks and it would last forever. A lot of the building infrastructure today in terms of the elevator stuff is made for like 10, 15 years,
Yep.
as opposed to back in the day it was 50 years, you know. So a lot of that technology is changing and codes have changed a lot and safety and all that. And in the name of safety, it's always better to upgrade to the most safest technology. But from what you're talking about in the infrastructure concept, 100%, it makes total sense. It's an interesting journey that brought you into the elevator industry, for sure.
And Sean, one of the things you have to think about it, there's like macro and micro dynamics. So the macro dynamics is with the aging of the population, aging of population and also growth in population. We
Yeah,
only have one way to go. That would be up.
yeah,
So there's core demand for more and more elevator or vertical transportation assets.
yeah.
And, I would sort of posit to you if you can determine there's a higher ROI that's happening across the industry, you
Hmm.
could actually increase your financial rates of return. So one of the things you and I talked about is a problem in the industry, which is the payment cycles.
Yeah,
Everybody's waiting for everybody. It's this
yeah,
kind of 120 days, 240 days. And you're like, wait a second, I did the work on this piece of equipment in
yeah,
April and you're paying me in December. Like, hang
yeah.
on a second. So, how do you change that dynamic? And part of it is if you think about how do you, like the GCs, for example, right?
Yep.
Their big challenge is they have very low margins. So, in vertical construction, their
Mm.
margins are like 4 to 5%.
Yeah. But
You
very high, very high revenues, I guess.
high revenue, but think about that from a financial standpoint. You could put your money into a
Right.
bank and make a similar rate of return for less risk, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
I
for
mean, that's
sure.
kind of like I said that to a guy from AECOM that was building T7. You think I smacked him in the face. It was just an observation, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the things the elevator industry can think about, how do you help the GCs protect their margins, right?
Yeah.
So if you pay me, one hand washes the other. If the elevator industry it can think about how do I improve those margins for the GCs, A, I'm going to win more business, right? And B, I'm going to have a happy client.
Hmm.
And then moving into the asset owners, right? So you're a real estate developer or you're a hospital or a university. Again, I mean, you were in the elevator industry. Who were your best clients? The people you were Zooming or the people you had a positive relationship?
Well, let me back up slightly and I'll touch on that in just a minute. But I want to go back to the business challenge you brought up, getting paid on time.
Yep, big
So
problem.
definitely want to talk through that because there's some things that people don't think about sometimes. I'll give a quick example. I have one of my clients that they were looking at a job and I'm like, be careful. It's a construction job. A lot of times they don't pay until the rears. You're going to do a lot of work and buy parts and have labor, and you might not get paid right away. The elevator company is a small piece of the big picture. In
Exactly.
construction, it's often backburnered and like, we'll get you paid later, we'll figure it out later. And they're struggling with cash because of that scenario. So, construction is a very tough market, especially for a new or growing elevator company, because they don't have the leverage and they don't have the resources to push and fight as aggressively as they should. But talking about that whole piece in general, I think early conversation and early agreement is extremely important. And I'll be honest, like I failed at it miserably early on in my business. Like it's not something you don't want to deal with. You don't want to deal with payment terms and all that stuff. But what I learned is the sooner you can have those early conversations, the quicker that you all can come to terms and agree on the plan, the clearer and better it is going to be about what the future is. So, for example, we had some really good clients that were property management companies. And I went to him and said, listen, I'm a small company. I need to know when I'm going to get paid so I can plug it into my cash flow pro forma and feel comfortable and confident. So if you're going to pay me in 30 days, you're going to pay me in 45 days, you're going to pay me in 60 days, I need to know. Let's be fair, let's be upfront, let's be consistent. I would love to get paid in 15 days, but I know that's not realistic. Would you do a discount if you paid me in 15 days? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. So we worked out a plan for them to pay me in 15 days. And then they didn't pay me in 15 days. They paid me in 45 days and took the discount. So there's some.
Mon Dieu, shocking, shocking, just shocking. I can't even believe that happened.
So yeah, payment terms is an extreme challenge in our industry, and it's really relationship driven. When you get in construction, they don't care. There is relationship when you go in, but when it comes to the numbers, like you said, those GCs, if they're looking at 5% margins, they're looking at cash flow challenges throughout the whole project.
Exactly.
And anything that's a hiccup and anything they can do, because like I said, the elevator is a small piece, but it is a piece, it's an expensive piece. And if they can hold some of that money and use it for other allocations and fight that way, then it's easier for them to do that. I will say, I think the majors got really good about managing construction, cash flow, and those relationships. And so the independents have tried to learn to do that stuff and gotten better and better with it. But it's all about communication and early understanding and agreement about how payments can unfold.
Yeah, I think it's one of those difficult conversations, but it's infrastructure, isn't it?
Yep.
So, like one of the things with, because I'm a big fan of technology. So, I look at ways, how do you improve the process? So, one of the things that we did as a supplier company is I partnered with a company called Lex Labs.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got my first RFP, it was like 12,000 pages. I'm like, oh my God, are these people crazy? I mean, it's longer than the Bible. This will take me forever. And so what this technology is able to do is it can read through it and it creates a checklist. And so you can look at all the different components that are of the elevator package. And, it's always trust but verify. And the one aspect it has, which is really fantastic, is that you can hover over controller and it'll go to page 11,062. So you can
Really?
check if the technology is correct. So one of the problems, right? So when you think about you're dealing with the GC, knowledge and information is power. So you have your checklist, you have your knowledge, you have your information. And also, nothing to say about our brethren in the elevator consulting business, but there are some, and the specs, you've probably seen this, have problems in them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this is a process using artificial intelligence, which is the buzzword, to
Yep.
improve the quality of the specs. And it also helps you as an elevator operator to win a job because everybody wants to think, oh, they really looked at that spec. And so you can say on page 9,062, I noticed XYZ. The person's like, oh, they read the whole thing. You don't
Right.
know all the details. So
Yeah.
the idea behind that is you start the initial journey where you know where the numbers are. So to your point, that's door number one. And one of the problems that I would assume the ISPs face is this is a relationship business. So you have to think about how much time you spend on RFPs.
Right.
And we all know everybody has friends.
Mhm.
And there are certain GCs who always go with certain elevator companies. That's just life.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that this technology allows you to do is you can decide like, I'm never going to win this one. I'm just going to price not competitively and not worry about it. But
Yeah.
it also allows you, if XYZ GC has asked you to bid 10 times and you got the big goose egg, you can say, hey, can we have a conversation?
Right.
We bid on, and it's much more powerful to say we bid on XYZ project, and please give us feedback.
Right.
Why don't we win?
Yeah. Why are we
And
never
they
going
have to squirm a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about strategically managing your cash flow because if you think
Yeah.
about like how much time you work on RFPs and winning new business, right?
Yep.
And then to your point, then you figure out who are the better clients, right? And I would posit that if someone has a personal relationship, you're going to get paid faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other problem that I saw or noticed is the paperwork, especially if you're dealing with big public agencies. Everybody has this painful paperwork, right?
Hmm.
So if you can come up with technologies that can track the paperwork,
Yeah.
it's those small incremental changes that can help your cash flow picture.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you asked me earlier who was my best clients. Interestingly, a lot of them were government. And the reason they were really good clients for us is because number one, they bring a lot of elevators and a lot of opportunity. But number two, I built relationships with the most
Mhm.
important people and said, how can I make your life easier?
Exactly.
Because they want to pay, but they have all these processes and systems, and you got to go here and here and here. So what we did is work closely with them on building out what do you need to approve things with everything in a packet, and we built a packet. So essentially, like, we took a call and say it was a billable call.
Mhm.
Well, they needed to know who called it in, when the tech was there, how long he
Mhm.
was on site, what the resolution was, why it's billable, how it relates to the contract. And then we build a software plan around that and actually automated, it got reviewed by the supervisor and then got sent to their team, and then they could process it and pay it sooner. Now, it didn't always work perfectly like that, but that was the intent. And it was a proactive approach to how do we make sure this is moving and not 2 months down the road, why are we not getting paid? Oh, because we're missing a ticket or something crazy like that.
But it's less crazy because there's processes in place, right?
Right.
So I row. Okay. This is my midlife, my other midlife. I became an athlete, which is a longer story. But
Oh
one of
yeah,
the
the
things
rowing.
I learned from rowing is a very small change really changes the path and the
Yeah.
pace of the boat. So
Yeah.
when you physically are on the water and you're like, oh, this is like how I hold my hand, it's kind of like seemingly, it's not actually.
Right.
So if you think about my goal is to generate ROI. And what are the pain points? What are the inflections? What can I do in the process to make it incrementally just a little easier? So your win rate becomes higher, but also the profitability on your business improves.
Yep.
And you made a really good point, which is like business 101, you have to pick your clients, right?
Yep.
And there's certain clients that you have a similar mindset, you have a personal relationship with them, and they're going to take care of you. And there are
Hmm.
other people, it's like, so I think as much as technology just allows you to have the tools to be
Yeah.
able to address some of these issues. So, one
So
question for you. I've
yeah.
befriended elevator mechanics, and some of the feedback that I've heard from them is now they have all these tracking systems. So, they want to be billed for every second of every hour, and they got to go to the bathroom, they got to get their tools. And so, the macro view is that if I can calculate whatever somebody's doing when they're on a project, I'm going to improve profitability. But
Hmm.
there's a big difference from someone who's in the head office watching you and you risking your life being in a hoistway, in a shaft, figuring out what is that little kind of trick or difference that can happen.
Hmm.
So it's a tension. And the question is, how important is pride of ownership or pride of craftsmanship versus let me watch every penny of every, right? And
Right.
so one of the things that I think private equity, so it's my people from Wall Street, have done roll-ups of elevator industries, and I can guarantee you they have no idea of what's
Right.
happening. They
Right.
really don't, right? So they look at their spreadsheets, they look at their models, and they're like, okay, if this guy, blah, 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 blah. But having that conversation and being able to work with them and communicate with them in their language, they would understand the ROI of it. And
Mm.
I think that's a challenge for the industry. And you would be a perfect person to be that spokesperson.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and there's several frames of thought around this. But my one perspective would be it's all about the manager, like the manager and the relationship he has with the techs and trusting his techs. And yes, corporate and the office may need to track everything because if something comes up or something happens or in the name of safety, making sure everybody gets home safe, 100% necessary, or somebody says that we had this happen in a company that I was working with. Somebody said this guy was in another place and, was stealing stuff, and we were able to look, and that was not the case. So there are random world scenarios where that is helpful. But when it really comes down to it, it's like the manager and the technicians having a good, solid relationship. Why don't you leave our fellow listeners with a golden nugget, some kind of great business advice you'd like to leave them, something that they could take and implement in their business today?
Well, I think the most important business one-on-one is deciding who is the ideal customer profile for you.
Mhm.
And it might be a different customer that works for me versus you. And then try to be solutions based. So you figure out what their pain points are and you solve them for them. And there's different pain points depending on who your client is. And I think we all have to be realistic about where we have a natural connection, right? I mean, it's kind of when you meet a friend or you meet your partner, there's that initial alignment of interests. So I think as a business owner, really determining who is your ideal customer profile and becoming an extension of their team is the one strategy that works across all businesses. And during my 35 years in Wall Street, what I saw was what made businesses succeed and fail. And it's really that ideal customer profile. And the other point that you made is how do you inspire your employees? And the reality is, it's not just money. People are engaging in activity for legacy, for pride of ownership. And one thing that I really admire about the elevator industry, people really like elevators. They think
Yep.
they're cool. They want to look at the ride. I go and visit all these elevator cabs from the turn of the century. And how do you harness that innate excitement about delivering quality so your team is part of this extension of that ideal customer profile? So that would be my pieces of advice. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And thanks for all the contributions you, Sean, have made to the elevator industry and to me as a newbie learning.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Have a wonderful day.
You too, as well. Happy New Year.
Thank you for listening to the Elevator Entrepreneur Podcast. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I will continue to empower my fellow elevator entrepreneurs.